Nice to see you. My name is Jeremy. I'm leading these sessions this month. This is number 5 of 5. Next month we have Damien, who has very good knowledge of Buddhism, so ask him lots of technical questions. So the theme, I think many of you have been here all month, so you know we're looking at this idea of deceptive appearances and misconceptions, and the idea that things can appear differently to how they actually exist. So trying to identify the gap between how things appear and how things exist. And in particular, when we have these so-called afflictive states of mind that are bothering us, like anxiety or anger or whatever it is, things that are disturbing our mind, how they're arising due to these misconceptions. So the idea is that by identifying the misconception, that you remove the basis for the afflictive state of mind to arise, whether it's anxiety or anger or whatever. So this is kind of very interesting because, as you know, these afflictive minds can be quite difficult to pacify when we're trying to control our anger when we're in a very difficult situation, someone's attacking us verbally, for example. So these afflictive emotions can arise up very strongly, as we know, can be quite difficult to sort of pacify. So if we have some understanding about how these states of mind are arising based on misconceptions about the situation that's causing that we're experiencing, then we can sort of start to sort of dismantle or pacify those afflictive emotions. So that's the idea, yeah. And the other idea which I've been talking about is that we start with the sort of more obvious misconceptions. So a few weeks ago we were talking about things like attachment and aversion. So attachment being exaggerating the good qualities of something and trying to hold it close, and aversion being exaggerating the bad qualities of something and trying to push it away or avoid it. So that's sort of maybe more obvious. And then beneath that, so looking at why things like attachment and aversion arise, then they're based on sort of more subtle misconceptions. For example, grasping at permanence, which we were talking about a few weeks ago. So this is the idea of sort of working through and identifying these increasingly subtle layers of misconceptions, and it's described in text as like a network of misconception. They're sort of working together, not sort of like a layer of a cake, but more like sort of a network. But some are definitely more subtle than others. So the subtler ones are more difficult to identify and more difficult to see how they're affecting us. So I thought tonight we'd do a bit of a deep dive into the most subtle, which is this idea in Buddhism about emptiness, or in Sanskrit called shunyata, which you might have heard of. It's a very big theme in Buddhist literature and thought, and for me I find it probably the most interesting aspect of Buddhist philosophy and practice, this idea of emptiness, or selflessness it's also called. So I just wanted to introduce that idea to you. Some of you might be familiar with it, and it's quite philosophical, and by that I mean some of the ideas I think are maybe a bit abstract and they rely on particular terminology, so you have to sort of work through the terminology in order to get to the concepts, but we'll see how we go with that. And it's also a very good topic to investigate through discussion, and so we'll have opportunity to discuss it later. So anyway, before we do that, in order to investigate subtle misconceptions, we need concentration. So that's why there's an emphasis on developing concentration through meditation, which is what we'll do now. So we'll do the same meditation we've been doing each week on the breath. And what we're trying to do here is just that, to develop concentration and to get the mind used to focusing on one thing without wandering away, for the purpose of developing that concentration as a tool for analysing things like misconceptions. That's the idea. So firstly, just relax your body and your mind. And let go of all of the busyness, the things you've been busy with all day, all the things going on in your life and in the world, the wider world. Just let go of thinking about them for a while. Just bring your attention to your body and observe your body. As you breathe out, you release any tension you're holding in your body, in your limbs, your torso, your neck, your head. And then bring your focus just to your breath moving in and out. Focus particularly on the point just under the tip of your nose, the breath moving in and out past that point. So our chosen object of meditation is the breath. So we use mindfulness to remember this object, keep it in mind. And we use introspection to observe whether the concentration is staying on the object or whether it's wandering off. And when it does wander off, to bring it back to that point. Just place it on that. Rest it on that. So try to keep your concentration for the duration of 21 breaths. So breathing in and out is one breath. So if your mind's wandered, just bring it back to that point of concentration immediately. Place it there. Okay, so now that we've developed some degree of concentration, we can use that for introspection. And in this meditation, we're just looking at the I, or the self, or the me, and just trying to understand it or observe it. And in particular, observe how it appears to us, how it appears to exist. So you start with a thought like, I am here. Just think, I am here. And try to observe how the self is appearing to you when you say that, I am here. So, for example, does it have a location? Is it within your body or outside of your body? Does it completely pervade your body? So when you think, I am here, where does the self or I appear to be? So in a meditation like this, we're not trying to create an appearance, we're just trying to observe how things naturally appear to us in a non-analytical way, just the appearance. So if you think that the self is appearing to you as sort of pervading your body or as one with your body, but then if you think my body, then it might appear to be separate to the body. So you can see how the self appears differently depending on how we're thinking about it. For example, as one with the body, or as the owner of the body, when we think my body. And it's helpful also to investigate whether the I or the self is appearing as something unchanging or as something impermanent that's changing. when you think, I am here, does the self appear to be some kind of solid, unchanging self? So if you think of the self of last year, something that you did last year, does it appear to be the same self as the one that's appearing now? Or when you think of the self of the future, as in I'm going to do something next year, is it the same self? Is it appearing to be the same self, some kind of unchanging self? And then also we can analyze whether the self is one entity or whether it has parts. For example, if you think of the different aspects of yourself, like your personality traits, are they parts of the self? Or are they owned by the self? So if you think, I am friendly, or I am shy, or I am anxious, or these feelings, are they like parts of the self? Or are they owned by the self? So we're just observing how the self appears in different contexts. So sometimes when things are going really well and we've done something really successfully and people are very happy with us and praising us, then we have this feeling like, I am good, I'm happy, I'm successful, I'm pleased with myself. And so this sort of feeling of happiness and success is sort of pervading myself. But then in a similar situation, if we're being criticized by people, or we've made a mistake and something's gone wrong, we've accidentally hurt someone, and then we start doubting ourselves, thinking, oh, maybe I'm not so good, maybe I'm flawed. So we're just observing how the self is appearing in different situations like that. And then also we consider whether the self is independent. So when the self appears to our mind, when we think, I am here, does it appear to be independent, as in existing without depending on anything else, arising independently? So does the self depend on the body, for example? Does it depend on the mind? Does it appear to exist independent of those, body and mind? So if you took away the body and you took away the mind, could the self still exist? Does it appear like that, as though it's a self-existent entity? So the conclusion of this sort of introspection is just to observe that the self does appear in many different ways, and we may not be aware of this, that it's appearing in many different ways to ourselves, could be because we tend not to observe that. So in the teaching, the Buddhist teachings, the Buddha is saying that it's important that we understand how the self is appearing to us, how it appears to exist. And I'll explain more about that later. But that's the idea of this meditation, just to observe that. Be aware of that. Okay, thank you. Just relax your concentration. Okay, any comments or questions or about that meditation? So I hope I didn't confuse you there, but basically I just wanted to do that exercise of observing the self, observing the I, because I think it's something we tend not to do. And then, and it's an interesting exercise just to see how the self appears in different ways, and sometimes in contradictory ways, sometimes as being one with the body, and sometimes as the owner of the body, and sometimes appearing as something really good and something really, problematic. Yeah. Any thoughts? Is that useful or not? Okay, we'll talk more about that in a minute. So just as I was saying before, talking about these layers of misconceptions and how they become gradually more subtle and how they depend upon each other, how they sort of build on each other. So as I was saying with attachment and aversion, as we were discussing, when you have strong attachment to something, you're projecting some good quality onto the object, and you're seeing that quality as being somehow inherent in the object. And then based on that projection, you're seeking to grasp strongly onto that thing and trying to hold it close. And that's causing problems like, for example, as we've been discussing, when it's taken away from you, you suffer because you feel like that source of happiness is being taken away. Or even if you've got the object, you can be anxious about losing it because you have strong attachment to it. And the same with aversion. When you're projecting bad qualities onto something, then you can have anxiety about, for example, if it's a person that you find very unpleasant, you can have anxiety about having to be with that person or having to meet them, for example, or work with them. So in Buddhist literature, the attachment and aversion, the problems related to those are summarized as the 8 worldly feelings or the 8 worldly dharmas. So they are attachment to gain, to getting things, and aversion or fear of losing things. Attachment to pleasure, as in things that feel good, and aversion to things that are uncomfortable. And then attachment to fame, meaning having a sort of a higher status, and aversion to disgrace, as in having a low status. Attachment to praise, to people saying good things about you and thinking good things about you, and aversion to criticism. So this is sort of a summary of, I guess, a lot of what's going on in our life, and a lot of our, these afflictive emotions that we're dealing with can be traced back to these 8, I think. So they're keeping us quite busy, these 8, because of attachment and aversion. And then, as we were saying last week, attachment and aversion arise because of having a strong focus on the I, or on the self. So this idea of self-centeredness. And so that's the idea is that by focusing strongly on this self and sort of neglecting the other people or beings in the world, that serves as the underlying cause for attachment and aversion. So based on this strong sense of I, then we naturally have a strong sense of wanting to pull all the good things towards this I and push all the unpleasant things away. So, the obvious problems with self-cherishing, as we were talking about last week, is firstly it creates a lot of problems in our interpersonal relationships, but then it sort of creates this situation where it's very difficult for us to to find contentment, because the strong focus on the I is fine-tuning or becoming overly sensitized to wanting to have everything good for this self and push away everything that's unpleasant. So we create this unrealistic situation where we're trying to control the world and pull all the good things towards us and push the problematic things away. So self-cherishing is deceptive in that it appears to be something that's helping us, is like a self-preservation instinct, but it's actually creating all of these problems for us. And as the Dalai Lama often says, the best way to be happy is to let go of this self-cherishing, relax that, and focus more on others. So the practice of love and compassion become very important for counteracting that. So love being the practice of wanting others to be happy, and compassion of wanting others to be free of suffering. So that's why there's a very strong emphasis in Buddhist practice, but also in all other spiritual traditions, I would say, on love and compassion, because it's the direct antidote to this self-cherishing, this self-centered mind, which is creating all of these problems for us, as well as obviously being helpful for the people around us if you're loving and compassionate. But it's also very much helping ourselves to overcome this self-centeredness and all the problems that are arising from that. So if you think about the various problems in your life, I think you can always find there's self-centeredness and attachment and aversion operating in there somewhere as a cause. So then why do we have this tendency to sort of emphasize I, the self, the me, and tending to neglect others? And that's from the Buddhist explanations, this idea called self-grasping, which is the idea of a useful word here is reifying. Reification means making the self more real than it is. So the idea here is that we have a misconception about what the self is and how it exists, and we're sort of making it more concrete or real than it actually is. So, for example, in that meditation we were looking at whether the I appears to be independent. So we have this tendency to think of this I as arising independent of causes and conditions. But when we analyze, we can see that this I arises independence upon, like the thought of I, for example, and it arises independence upon the various parts of the self. So I think this is where it gets kind of complicated. So I thought we could do, there's some good, I call them thought experiments. So I brought my helpful teapot along for this purpose. It's a nice teapot. I bought it at Woolworths for $12. It's pretty good. So, using the teapot as the object of analysis, if I were to say, looking around, where's the teapot? And you'd say, it's there. So think about, when you say the teapot is there, think about how the teapot is appearing to you in that moment, in your mind. The teapot is there. So then the next step is to holding that image in your mind of the teapot being there. Then you try to analyze where exactly is the teapot. So you start with the different parts of the teapot. So is the teapot in the handle, for example? You'd say, well, yeah, kind of. I mean, it's not, the handle is not the teapot, but there's sort of a teapotness in the handle. And you do the same with the other parts, the spout and this thing. It's got a name, can't remember what it's called. Yeah, little handle. And then lid. And then the base. There is actually names for all these parts of the teapot. I looked them up and Google, I can't remember them now. There's an anatomy of a teapot. I think this is called the belly. The belly should be round. So anyway, so the idea is to do this analysis, is the teapot in the handle? Is it in the spout? Is it in the belly? So I think normally you'd say, well, the teapot is, there's a teapotness in the belly, but the belly is not the teapot. So you sort of feel like the teapot is sort of pervading all of the parts. Somehow it's all of the parts. It's not one of the parts. But then if you analyse each of the parts, like the spout, for example, can you find anything in the spout that is the teapot? So if you look at all the different parts of the spout, the top and the bottom and the sides and the inside and the outside, and you can't find anything there that you would call teapot. So you perform the same analysis with each of the parts, and there's nothing there that you can call teapot within those parts. You can go right down to the molecular or atomic level, and you won't find any teapotness there. So this is kind of contradicting the way the teapot appears to us in that first moment. When I say, where is the teapot? And you say, the teapot's there. So the teapot's appearing as having some kind of teapotness that covers its parts, There's a certain kind of... You sort of feel like that if you were to analyse, you'd find some kind of teapotness there. Feel free to disagree with me, but this is kind of the way it's explained. So the idea is, if the teapot is not found in any of its parts, then where is it? And the conclusion of this analysis is that the teapot is just something labelled by the mind onto the suitable parts. So I can't label teapot onto this microphone because it doesn't have suitable parts. But this is suitable to be called a teapot because it performs the function and has all the right parts to be a teapot. So this is analysis to sort of illustrate the idea of selflessness, because the way the teapot is appearing to our mind when we first think teapot is there is having some kind of teapotness from its own side, as though there's something from the side of all these parts put together that is teapotness. But when we analyse, we can't find it. It's not findable. So then you can perform the same analysis to yourself. So it's the same idea. So for example, let's say somebody rang me up on my phone and I rudely took the call in front of the class and it was someone saying, "Where are you?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm at Tara Institute." "Yeah, where are you exactly?" "Oh, well, I'm in the meditation hall. I'm sitting at the front." "Yeah, but are you in your body?" And I'd say, "Yeah, of course I'm in my body. I'm here." And they said, "Where are you in your body?" I said, "Well, I'm sort of everywhere. I'm all around here." And then you analyse all the parts of your body. So if you're in your body, then you should be findable somewhere in there. So you can do the same analysis as the teapot, in your head and your torso and limbs, and go through all the parts of your body. So you can go right down to the molecular level, and you won't find any me-ness there. Jereminess. So it's an interesting exercise to go through, and it's comparing the way that we think about ourselves. So if someone says, "Where are you?" you say, "I'm here." Without a doubt, we think, "I'm here." We don't have to think about it. We just say, "I'm here." It's obvious, I'm here. But then when you analyse, you can't find that self that's appearing when you think, "I am here." And in the meditation instructions, it's said it's useful to think also of, when you're in a very emotional situation, like you have a near-death experience when you're in a car, for example, just nearly gets hit by a truck or something, or if someone's accusing you falsely of committing a crime, and you say, "I didn't do that," and this strong sense of I comes up. And try and capture that feeling of I, and then compare that feeling of I, how I appearing to exist, with how it actually does exist through analysis. So in the same way as with the teapot, you find there's nothing within the body, And then you can perform the same analysis on the mind. You look at all the different parts of the mind. You know, the mind is like a collection of so many thoughts and ideas and concepts and memories and etc. Within those, there's nothing you can find that you would call I, me. So again, feel free to disagree. And this is, you know, ideas that have been debated over, you know, thousands of years, particularly in Indian traditions of thought, and many different schools of thought about where the I actually is. You know, some people will say it's some schools of thought that it's actually a part of the mind, called the mental consciousness. But then if you assert that the I is some small part of the mind, then that's not how it appears to us, is it? Like when someone rings me up and says, "Where are you?" I say, "I'm here." I don't have to think about myself as some small part of the mind. It's not how I appear, you know. Or if someone criticizes me, says, "You're an idiot. You're so incompetent," and there's feeling of, "I am. How dare you say that to me?" And there's this big me here, sort of filling the body, and maybe even bigger than the body at that point. So that's completely different. That's not how the I is not appearing as some thought in the mind. And one person, I remember one night, he said, "Oh, maybe it's just that scientists haven't discovered yet where the I is. You know, if you eventually investigate the brain, you're going to find this thing in there that's the I." You know, which is interesting idea. But what the point they're making here is that the way we relate to the I or the self is completely different. Or when we analyse, it's that self that we assume to be here, it can't be found. So that's something to check up, whether you agree with that or not. So this is the Buddhist idea of selflessness, you know, that this big self that we sort of assume to be here, and we sort of live our life according to this self being here. When we analyse, we can't actually find that self. So there's an analysis used of like a soldier who's out fighting for a country that doesn't exist, you know, killing and dying for a country that doesn't exist. They think that, assuming that there's a country back there that they're fighting for, but they go back and realise that actually that country doesn't exist. Or like the stories you hear of soldiers in the Pacific Islands who thought the war was still going on, but had actually stopped, you know, years ago, but they were still fighting. So this idea of we're sort of making this wrong assumption about the self, and based on that creating these other wrong assumptions like that I am the most important thing, and then based on that this idea that of trying to pull all the good things close and push all the bad things away. So all based on this sort of fundamental misunderstanding about, you know, what the self is. So the self is described just as something that we're labelling onto the body and the mind. So in that regard, it's seen as something very subtle. And if the Buddha is saying that if we can understand that point, that it frees us from a lot of these mental afflictions, because they're all arising in dependence upon this wrong assumption that there's this big, concrete, reified self sitting here that needs to be protected and needs to be collecting all the good things and pushing away all the bad things. And so this is regarded as the most sort of powerful technique for dismantling this whole network of problematic concepts that give rise to, you know, self-centeredness and attachment, aversion, and then all the other problems that arise from those. So hopefully I haven't confused you too much with all of that. That's just to give you some idea of this idea of selflessness and what it's talking about. And it is a subtle topic, because when you start to think about that, well, how can the world kind of function if all of these things, like teapots, are just something that's labelled onto a collection of parts? How can you make tea in something if it's just, you know, a label put onto parts? Or how can I exist just as, you know, this sort of idea of a me, a label put onto a body and mind. So these teachings come with some warnings, because if people get very kind of obsessed with these ideas or take them too far, then there's a danger that you might start thinking that you don't exist or that other people don't exist and everything is a figment of your imagination. But so it's important to keep reminding yourself that if I didn't exist, then I wouldn't even be able to do this analysis, and I wouldn't be experiencing happiness and problems. So I am experiencing all these things, and there's a lot of evidence that the people around me are experiencing the same. So I don't want you to go away thinking that things don't exist from this analysis, but just to question the way the self appears to you, the way I appear to you, and do this kind of, if you're interested, in this kind of analysis and questioning the most fundamental assumptions that we make about, me, about I. I mean, we don't really think about it at all, generally. We just assume I am here and I exist in the way that I appear to exist. But when we start to analyse, we realise that there's a lot of, problems with the assertion or assumptions that we're making about how this I exists. Assumptions like assuming that it's findable, that I'm here in my body, but then we check and we can't find me anywhere in the body. So I must be here in the mind, but that's not how I'm appearing. So using this kind of analysis can be very useful, I think, and very interesting and exciting, I reckon, because it shows how you can sort of cut through a lot of your assumptions. And I think when you start to think of yourself as not this sort of big, concrete, heavy me here that I need to look after all the time, maybe it's just a, like an idea. Maybe I can let go of a lot of all this, concern for this I. Maybe it doesn't need all this protection that I'm trying to create for it. So it can be very liberating, I think, in that way. Anyway, that's quite a lot of philosophy, metaphysics it's called, in Western thought. And there are Western philosophers who have similar ideas about the self. Wittgenstein, you might be familiar with, 20th century philosopher, German, who had similar ideas about the self, and so it's not just a Buddhist thing. So tell me, what do you think about that? Does that sound crazy or useful, or can you see how that might be helpful? Sort of analysing the self and how it appears.
I think it's really useful. But I was sitting here struggling with, if you don't know that's a teapot, is it still a teapot?
If you don't know, so like if you were someone from a country who doesn't have teapots, for example, you've never seen one. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think for that person it would be an object. They can see it's an object, a round object with things on it. They may not know what it's for. So in their mind they would be labelling like maybe white and blue object, for example. Or an ant, walking along, look up and think it's a mountain or something in my way, So it's a similar process that they're also projecting this label onto the thing, whether it's, mountain or just white, round thing. So again, the mind would be doing a similar thing of assuming that there's some kind of essence there, projecting that onto it. Yeah. So it's not sort of a consensus that we create by all agreeing that this is a teapot. Like in the case of that person who doesn't know what it is, or the ant. Still a similar process in their mind of projecting thingness onto it. Reifying it. Yeah. So, anything else? Yes. Yeah. 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 Say that last sentence again. There's nothing objective. Objectively solid. Right. Okay. Right. Right. So, but when you have that feeling, like when we analyze, we are aware that there's so much change and movement and happening in our mind, like you say, the emotions coming and going, arising and dissipating. But do you have this sort of feeling like there's some kind of essence or me, some kind of solid me that's experiencing all of that? Do you think we have that? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right, okay. Yeah. I agree, it's hard to define. So I think in an exercise like this, we're trying to firstly observe how it appears. So if you have this kind of feeling like, I am experiencing these emotions, I have anger, I have attachment, I have... So behind, what is this I that is experiencing all these things? How does that appear to you? It sort of feels like it's here somewhere. So then where is it? Is it in my chest or in my heart? So trying to just observe how it appears, capture that appearance is sort of like the first step in the analysis. And then once you've sort of got an idea of how it's appearing, then you analyze. Okay, so it's appearing to be maybe like a round ball in my chest, for example, So then you analyze, well, is there anything in my chest that I could really call I? So obviously, physically, you can't find anything there in the heart or the ribs or, So it's comparing the appearance with what we sort of know intellectually through analysis, and then trying to see how the appearance is just that, it's just an appearance. So if that sort of I thing there can't be found, so then what is the I? Is the idea. And, many people have many different theories about what the I is. But it's quite hard to find anything that you could point to as being the I. Sorry, yeah, question. Yeah, right. So as I said before, these techniques do come with some warnings, and so if you find that they're not helpful for you and they're actually creating some problems for you, you can just, park them. And there's many other practices that you could do that, you might find more suitable. But as a general explanation of our situation, we were all probably quite similar. The main problem we have is this sort of very busy mind. There's so much going on in our mind. So one of the first things we're trying to do is just to simplify what's going on in our mind, and like focusing, for example, on the breath. Just give yourself a break from so much busyness going on in the mind, and give your mind a chance to, to calm down and focus. So that's another technique. Another one which I find also helpful is not to try and control the mind, but sort of observe what it's doing. So this is said to be like, anyway, what you're not trying to control what your mind's doing, you're just sort of trying to observe it without getting involved in what it's doing. So for example, you might be thinking about something that someone's done to you and you're feeling, resentful, and you could sort of observe your mind going through these paces, but not follow those. Just observe it like it's, you're watching a movie or something. That's another technique. That's the idea. Sit with it just is sort of like observing it, as in not... because the pain is, you're talking about psychological pain, it's arising because of an idea, for example, that someone hurt you, or that there's, you're feeling that there's something wrong with you, or you're feeling, whatever causes you pain, it's anxiety. Like for me, I have quite a lot of anxiety about things. So for me, then it would just be a case of observing that feeling, where does it come from, how does it arise? And the idea is just by doing that, it's sort of pacifying it. So you're not thinking about the thing that you're anxious about, you're thinking about the experience is the idea. And so you're not thinking, oh my God, anxiety is so bad, I've really got to, get rid of it. You're just sort of observing it, doing its thing, kind of thing. Yeah. Another, as we were saying last week, is the practice of compassion. So you think that this pain I'm experiencing is being experienced by many other people, in exactly the same way, or a lot worse, for some people. And then you did that meditation where you sort of imagine this light going out and pacifying their pain, which is, exactly what I'm feeling. They're also feeling the same, and helping them to remove that, because then that sort of takes you out of yourself. You start thinking, my pain, my life, I'm so afflicted. It kind of makes your focus more expanded, I think. Yeah. Does anyone else have any comments on that? Ways of dealing with techniques you found to be helpful when you're dealing with afflicted states of mind? Because everybody's different and has different ways of dealing with things. Right. So how does that work, how that process? Are you just, like I was saying, observing it, as in like not getting involved with it, or?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like I have to sort of like vicious cycles of just like repeat, no resolution inside.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. So I think we can probably all relate to that cyclical nature of these afflictive states of mind, and they can, we can get into these circular thinking, and yeah.
In my case, they just became room enough for something else to come up, like to bring up into place. Like,
Yeah.
It's funny, Buddhism, you're supposed to wish people happiness and you don't have the source of happiness.
Yeah.
And I do wonder in Buddhism where everything's about non-attachment, what we consider those sources to be. Obviously a peaceful mind, an open mind.
Yeah.
Feels sort of open for business for energy to come in, and you feel totally detached from outcomes, that you don't what way anything goes, you're just looking to be loving and available, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just want a mind just quiet all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds nice. Yeah. Like turning off loud music, sort of just quietness. Yeah, so I think happiness would be sort of defined by each individual as what they regard as happiness. So yeah, like you say, for you it would be the idea of quietness and stillness. And
I like it bright and loud.
yeah. So it's different changes too. Yeah.
Is there emotions in Buddhism about what doesn't actually sources happiness?
What they source happiness from?
Yeah, illusions of happiness in Buddhism, the sources of happiness. Is that I feel like I've heard that. I've got that from other people, where they have happiness and the source of happiness.
Yeah.
So
yeah, good question. So the idea, I'm not sure if you're aware of the Buddhist idea of samsara, which is like this sort of existence that it's called cyclic existence, So in the Buddhist idea of samsara, everything in all of our experiences while we're in this situation are problematic, even the most pleasurable ones. So you think of the most happiest moment in your life, it's the tendency when we're in samsara is for things to become problematic. Like people say, having the birth of their child is a moment of great joy, but then immediately there's anxiety, worrying about the child, and am I a good parent? Am I looking after it properly? And why is it crying? And all these things come. So it's problematic. So the Buddhist answer is nirvana is happiness, as in we have to sort of remove ourselves from the situation which is problematic, which is called samsara. And it's a lot to do with this idea of having a sense of I and me, and wanting this me and I to be happy, and not being able to find this happiness for the me. So that's the sort of dynamic that we're in, that's samsara. So nirvana would be, like you say, removing yourself from that. So you don't have this strong sense of I that I have to look after. You can just, forget about that. Which doesn't mean that you don't exist, it just means that you're not sort of stuck in that sort of obsessive, There's a famous quote in the Buddha's story where this, what do you call it, like a serial killer was trying to catch the Buddha to kill him. He killed 999 people. He had to kill 1,000, and he was running after the Buddha, and the Buddha was just walking along slowly, but he couldn't catch him as fast as he ran. He said, "Why don't you stop running?" He said to the Buddha, and the Buddha said, "I stopped running a long time ago, actually." So meaning that when he, in the past, when he achieved enlightenment, he sort of stopped running, like you say. You're no longer striving, wanting to get this happiness for this I sort of thing. So that's the idea of liberation or nirvana. So I think that would be the Buddhist answer to that question. What makes happy? What makes you happy is that. So that's also interesting, because the idea is that your natural state is one of happiness and joy, and it's because of these misconceptions and the afflictive states of minds that arise on top of that are stopping us from experiencing that sort of natural happiness. Okay. So thank you for listening, and I hope that wasn't too much for you, but just to give you some idea of the idea of emptiness and shunyata, and also about this idea of deceptive appearances and how they sort of create a network and how we can dismantle this network through understanding the misconceptions. So we shouldn't feel too overwhelmed by these afflictive emotions because they're not as substantial as they might appear, is the idea. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for listening.